Hello and welcome back to Serpent Sunday. As always, I am your host, Morgan. This week we're going to be delving into 10 snake myths that tend to be pretty common in society and conversation, and we're going to be debunking those and talking about why they're myths. The first myth that we're going to be diving into today is the myth that snakes dislocate their jaws when they swallow their prey whole. Now, this myth has come about because if you see animals like a rock python swallowing an entire gazelle, it only seems logical that they must have completely dislocated the joint in order to do that. This, however, is not the case. A snake's skull is not fused like ours and is actually made up of joints that are much more stretchy and have much more of that ligament tissue in there. Also, the top of the skull and the bottom of the skull where the jaws are in some species are split, also allowing the jaw to split sideways as well in order to swallow prey that is larger than their head. And this is essentially how they are able to swallow that large prey. The jaw is not dislocated, it's just a bit more stretchy than ours. Our second myth today is the myth that baby snakes are more dangerous than their adult counterparts. While there is some evidence that adult snakes can control the amount of venom they inject, there is no definitive data to support that babies are unable to do this. And a secondary part to this myth that often goes along is that the toxin in baby snake venom is more potent than that in adults, and there is absolutely no evidence to back that up. No matter what age the snake is, their venom is going to be about the same. It just depends on what species the snake is. So baby snakes are not more dangerous than adults.
Action.
Myth number 3. If you are bitten by a snake, you should tie a tourniquet around your limb to stop the venom from reaching your heart and possibly even cut open the wound and attempt to suck the venom out. Both pieces of advice in this myth are no longer supported by any healthcare providers or governing agencies. When you do tie a tourniquet like that, you are essentially making the decision that the bitten limb is going to be lost. If that tourniquet is tight enough, the limb will not get the oxygenated blood it needs and it will begin to shut down the tissues. Now, the little aside to this is if you are out far enough into the wilderness that you're not going to be able to get anti-venom anytime soon, then yeah, a tourniquet may be necessary because in the long run, it's better to lose a limb than lose a life. And sucking out the venom, once it's injected, there's absolutely no way for you to actually suck the venom out of the wound. And any products that are sold as venom sucking devices usually just end up with more tissue damage around the wound area and ultimately more medical intervention being needed. Myth number 4. Snakes are aggressive and will chase you if you encounter them in the wild. Now, this myth is not true because snakes are not necessarily aggressive, they're fearful. They are, in fact, more afraid of you, a predator species as far as they're concerned, than we are of them. Now, there are certain scenarios in which it may seem like the snake is chasing you, and that includes the snake is cornered and you are between them and their mode of escape. So their only real option is to head in your direction in an attempt for them to preserve their own life. This is seen fairly often when people talk about water moccasins and that they say they're an aggressive species that will chase you if you encounter them without being provoked. That is not accurate. Just like any other species of snake, a water moccasin would rather get away from you and avoid conflict. But their instinct tends to be to escape towards the water because they are very good swimmers and that is where they are going to be safest. And if you are between that snake and the body of water, their protection, their escape, of course they're going to head in your direction while they attempt to return to the water. So snakes are not aggressive. Snakes will not attack you if they are not given a reason to defend themselves. But if they are heading in your direction, that means you are between them and escape. So maybe step aside. So myth number 5 that we're going to be looking at today is that you can tell a snake is venomous because it has a triangular head. Well, I hate to break it to you, but that is not a positive identification for venomous versus non-venomous species. It just so happens that many pit vipers tend to have a fairly triangular shaped head. There are plenty of species with a more rounded head, like coral snakes, that are fairly venomous, and there are also snakes that have no venom, whose heads are fairly angular in shape and may be mistaken using this ID system. In general, if you do see a snake in the wild, though, that you can't identify, just stay away, because you don't want to take the risk of it being venomous and needing that anti-venom or a trip to the hospital. So our 6th myth today is one that confuses me a little bit, that I've heard going around since I was a child, that I at least once a year have some sort of interaction with people about. And it's the myth that if you kill a snake, you should leave the body out in your yard somewhere because snakes will seek revenge on the person that killed their mate. Now, this myth has quite a few flaws in it for a number of reasons. The first reason is that this is entirely anthropomorphizing the animal. Anthropomorphizing is when you're projecting human characteristics and emotions onto something non-human, which, in case you didn't know, snakes are not humans. Also, snakes are not social animals. They don't make the kinds of bonds that keep mates together, like in a human situation, or to take another example from the animal kingdom, a lot of bird species mate for life, and snakes just don't do that. They're not social, they are classified as solitary, and frankly, if you kill a snake and leave the body out in hopes that the mate is going to come avenge the death, it's not going to happen. You're just going to end up with a rotting corpse in your yard. And to take another step back here, you shouldn't necessarily be killing snakes if you're trying to avoid human-snake negative interactions and trips to the hospital because you ended up getting bitten, since the majority of people that get bitten by venomous snakes or any snakes in general are because they were attempting to harm that animal. The best thing you can do if there's a snake in your yard that you do not want there is go inside for a little bit, leave it alone, and make sure you keep any brush piles, firewood piles, anything like that cleaned up off your property so that you're not attracting rodents and not attracting snakes into your yard. If this isn't working, there are usually numbers you can call that qualified people can come out and safely remove the snake and release it somewhere else back into the wild. So for your own sake, please don't listen to this myth, and please don't go out of your way to harm a snake. It's just going to end up with both of you getting hurt. Myth number 7 is a little bit more on the reasonable side, and I can understand where it comes from. The myth is that snakes are mostly just a very long tail with a head attached. And this basically comes from the fact that snakes are long, tubular things. But it's not accurate when you look at snake anatomy. In fact, snakes have a fairly short tail when you compare it to the rest of their body, and the main girth of the animal is basically torso protected by a very, very long rib cage. I will be posting a diagram of what the inside of a snake looks like. The organs are going to be elongated and the tail is very short, as you can see in the diagram. Myth number 8. This is kind of a throwback to our Western Diamondback rattlesnake episode, but it's one of the most common snake myths. And the myth is that you can age a rattlesnake by counting the number of segments in their rattle. Now, I'm going to give you a shortened response to this, and if you want a more in-depth one, feel free to go back and watch that video. But this is essentially wrong because while they do add a segment every time they shed more than once a year, and they do continuously lose segments as well between sheds. Myth number 9 is the myth that snakes are slimy. While it is true that they might be a little slippery if you just pulled them out of the water, they do not produce mucus like in amphibians, so they don't produce a slime, if you will. They may be slippery, they're probably going to be shiny because their scales reflect light different than our skin does. So remember, they're shiny, not slimy. Our final myth today is the myth that there is absolutely no such thing as maternal care in the snake world. Now, this is true-ish to an extent because when a snake is hatched or a species that gives live birth ends up giving birth to a new litter of snakes, the young are entirely capable of taking care of themselves. However, there are some species, like the rock python, that will furiously guard their clutch of eggs until the young hatches. This research that has presented this to the world of herpetology is fairly new, but it is there. There is at least some level of parental care in the snake world, even if it only really goes as far as protecting a clutch of eggs. All right, guys, we've finished our myths for today. Now, they were in no particular order. They are just listed based on how I happened to put them into my notes last night. As usual, I do have a reference down below. This week, it is the Encyclopedia Britannica entry that is the general snake entry, and it is a fairly good starting point for anyone looking to debunk more snake myths. And I will see you guys all next time. Thank you for watching this video. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you have not already done so. Also remember to follow me on all my social medias. The links are down in the description below, and check out thereptilegoth.com. If you found any value in this and you would like to support the channel, assuming you have the means to do so, go ahead and check out the Patreon. Again, that link is going to be down in the description below, just like everything else. See you next time.